All right. Welcome to the show. That was the intro. It's always weird to go from the transition from the intro to this. It's kind of clunky, I have to say. But that said, I got some new equipment coming my way. So that should be a good thing. And the equipment is, how do I say this? It's a suite of live streaming services, and it's a multi-camera setup. It's very different than what I have now. So it might take me a little bit of a learning curve to get there, but things like transitions and titles and all the stuff that you've been used to will probably change, and for the better, we hope. Well, your Friday is about to change for the better, we hope, because we're here today with my good friend, Howdie Mickoski, who's been on this show a number of times. He's one of the most requested guests. And every time he's been on the show, the feedback has been glowingly positive. Let's see if that streak continues today, because we're going to talk about some things that may trigger some people and may cause some people to react violently to their belief systems. And for other people, it might be very liberating to have this conversation. And for some in between, you might tease these ideas open, accept some, reject them all. At the end of 2 hours, we've opened a conversation. We've started a dialogue. And perhaps you might be able to view this realm a little bit differently as a result. Okay, so what I'd like to do before I bring the man on is I want to talk a little bit about the sponsor of the show, which is True Hemp Science. And if you follow my weekday show and you follow any of the other work that I do here on YouTube, you know that I speak very highly of THS's CBD products. And from what I've been able to experience, both personally and through the interaction with the rest of you, AKA what I call visible chattaria and invisible chattaria, you guys have had very similar experiences. In fact, the experience and the feedback has been so positive that we've put Chris on his heels to catch up with his gummy orders. Of course, the gummies are really good for going to sleep at night. He also has some tinctures that do the same thing as the gummies. So if you can't get the gummies, and he's working on a pretty significant backlog for those, that's a good place to be, by the way. If you have a business, you want to be catching up with yourself to some degree. But there's an alternative, and all you have to do if you're interested is go into True Hemp Science and check out their products. There's a whole shop menu over here, right? And then you'll be able to learn all about CBD, his particular CBD, which is different. Chris goes at this a little bit differently than other people who process the hemp plant. Now, if you have questions, you can always call him. And he and Marcia, who's his assistant there, are very good at answering your questions. Marcia has been studying Chris's product for quite a while, knows the ins and outs of it. So if you don't happen to get Chris, you'll get Marcia, and they're more than willing to work with you on your CBD needs, particularly if you're looking for an alternative for the gummies, which they do have in a tincture form. Okay, so if you go to truehempscience.com/ref/23, that's the portal, that's the window. If you go there and you spend $100 or more, you get free product. $100, $150 or more, free shipping. All you got to do is put in 15MINS in the little checkout box, your code, and that lets Chris know where you're coming from and the deal that you're getting. Okay. All right. I was gonna talk about. I'll do it at the end of the show. We'll do it at the end of the show. We're gonna do a little memorial for our friend Janine's little companion that is passed on and returned to dog. And we'll do that at the end. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Not that we're wasting time. It's all relative, isn't it? But let's get to what's important here today. And that's to bring on my guest, Mr. Howdie Mickoski. And we're going to go on a ride today. Let me put the cans back on, as they say in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here
Hey,
we
Robert.
are. I'm good. And I know you're doing pretty well because we just talked a little while ago. So we're going to talk about your book today, Exiting Plato's Cave. And you and I had a little bit of a talk about this a couple of weeks ago. And so I know where you're coming from, and you and I are more or less on the same page with this. And we're going to explore the different parameters and permutations of your latest work. And a big shout out to Verushka, who stepped up and really helped you organize a lot of this material. And that was great. And again, to me, whatever the end game is, the process is still important. So when we connect with somebody and there's a helping hand and they're able to step in and, help us complete certain things or just be a part of our life, I think it's an important piece of being here. So thanks again to Verushka for that. So let's talk a little bit about you. People know about your work, Waking Up to Truth, your book on Egypt, your book on the World's Fairs, and each one of them exploring big questions. What's this all about? What happened? Why does this thing exist? And are there answers? And if so, what are the answers? And you've come to the big question, the really big question, which is, why are we here? What is going on here? What defines the terms and conditions of this world, and what happens after we leave our bodies? Which is, I think, probably the ultimate question. So leaving Plato's cave is an analogy you've used before. And you went back to this idea of Plato's cave to try to rediscover what was really going on with Plato's cave. Was there a Plato? Was there a cave? Like all these things that are important to the topic that we're about to dive into. So with that, why don't I give the floor to you and let you talk a little bit about how you got to this place, and then we're gonna dive in.
Sure. So, I guess as an opening here for everybody, I want to start off by, officially making sure everybody knows, I don't know for sure what's going to happen after we die. I don't know for sure how this realm was created and exactly why. All I have is a lot of years of work, which is generated into the thesis we're going to talk about tonight that became my new book, Exit the Cave. And it's probably, for some people, going to sound very negative. But to me, it's actually not negative, because removing false and removing lies, and particularly foundational lies, means you actually get closer to truth. The longer you're holding on to the false, actually, to me, that's negative, even though you feel good.
Right.
So that's where this project was coming from. How did I get here? Yeah. So I'd finished the Exposing the Expositions book and kind of threw a wrench into whatever I believed about history. But I had this nagging problem for a long, before I wrote Falling for Truth, which was a story of my death experience and sort of
Falling for Truth. My bad. I said Waking Up to Truth. My apologies.
Yeah, Falling for Truth.
Falling for Truth.
And there was a lot of elements of my research 20 years ago and things I was digging into that I pulled back from that book. I pulled back from, I touched on it, but I didn't go as strong as I was researching, because it went against the sort of the standard spiritual message. And I thought, well, there's 500 books with the same message. I should navigate a little smoother. About 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I kind of, from coming out of, again, of our 2-year experience, all the conversations I've had with people like yourself and so many other good ones out there, I kind of had to come to the point of like, hey, you know what? We're in a suffering pit of hell. Let's be absolutely clear. That's what this place is. And we've been lied to about it for ever since we were actually before we were even born. And so the book, and I can give everyone a quick overview of the book, and then we can talk. So
Sure.
the book is right now, it's a PDF book. It'll come out as a print book in a couple of weeks, but right now I wanted to have it available because I didn't know how long, even the internet would be running and lasting given our situation. So I wanted to make sure something was available immediately for people who wanted it. It's 15 chapters. The first chapter is an overview of things like reincarnation. Is this place a food type of farm for non-human entities? What kind of creator created this place? And the idea of the memory wipe, all things I'm sure you'll want to talk about. Chapter 2 is about Plato's cave and mostly what's missing in the story of Plato's cave. Chapter 3 is on origin stories, be they Cathars, Gnostics, a number of different people. I have some small chapters on some near-death experiences, on an action plan for our death, a recapitulation. I have a bit placed in as a novel. I talk about movies like Dark City and Westworld in chapter 8. I go through a few more chapters of near-death experiences. I talk about prayer. I talk about spiritual warfare, lucid dreaming, try to discuss a bit more of what the soul is. I have a chapter on the Cathars and their belief structure, and I end with a discussion of Castaneta's active side of infinity and dealing with not just the after-death experience, but the after-death experience in multiple astral realms. So
Right.
that's what I tried to put together, which I'm calling book 1, because I know this is just my warm-up. There's another one that's going to take me sometime next year to another level. But this is the opening, the opening start of everything, and that's the subject matter. So, what would you like to talk about, Robert?
Okay. Well, let me bring up the PDF so I can have some reference points here, and we can begin to sort of drill down. By the way, just again a disclaimer. I always love these disclaimers where the content you're about to witness may be triggering, right? And if you consent to clicking on this link, we're not responsible for any. So there is a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that here, but we're all adults, and it's good to be able to talk about these things in a way that are uh, open, have an open conversation.
Yeah, and
Before
again, I think it's all positive because it's all about finding your own inner power. It's all about finding where the power of our being really lies. Does that lie on something outside of us, or is it something inside of us? And the problem is most everything of where things lie is a lie.
right. So let's get back to what happened in the last 2 years. In 2020, our world seemingly shifted in a much more radical way. We've had semi-radical shifts. We've had collective traumas that we have experienced, whether it's 9/11 or JFK. For some other countries, it might be some other event. But we've experienced these incremental sort of traumatic shifts, and they've been usually regional or national at times. But in 2020, it went global. We went through a global crisis. We went through a global trauma. And at the beginning, I believe there was a significant amount of goodwill that people were willing to bank on for a brief period of time. Although there were some of us who saw from a very early point of this whole thing where things were going, and they weren't going to get that goodwill at all. But for the most part, most people aren't really aware of that. If they are, to varying degrees, but like, okay, maybe this is real. The evidence is compelling. We'll do what you tell us to do, especially if it's only for 2 weeks to stop the spread. Well, it didn't stop there. It kept going and going and going. It kept getting darker and darker and more demanding. Meanwhile, we have other crises that are starting to take place and pop up. The ongoing psychodrama with Trump and his ability or inability, whatever you want to call it, to stay in office and stay in power. And then we have the whole Summer of Floyd thing here in the United States, which again begins to spread globally. Black Lives Matter, So things start to really happen in 2020. There is this acceleration that takes place. And my experience is that every time we reach a new decade, there's a major change that is instituted. You just go back decade by decade by decade, and it happens. So here we are in the 2020s, and this is the new change, right? In the 2010s, it was everything that happened on the other side of before that with 2009, the housing crisis, everything that took place during that period. You have the election of Obama. That's a whole other series of changes. In 2000, it's Bush, it's 9/11, right? So every time we move into a decade, there's something major that takes place during that decade. And this time it was the Pearl Harbor for the entire planet. And I think during that time, what was revealed, maybe for the first time in such a grand scale, the absolute tyranny, programming, disregard, and horror for humanity. We had never experienced that before. People being snatched away or beaten up or forced out of their, this has never happened before. Right? So now it's almost as if they've unlocked the gates of hell, and they're allowing us to see things maybe as they always were, or maybe a more visceral permutation of it. So would you say that that's a fairly correct summation? And where are you with, because I know you talk about it in the chapters, like it's always been this way. There've been different versions, but maybe not as visceral. So where are you with that?
Yeah. So yes, we got two different sort of things to talk about, right? It's the Plato's cave idea, which is the illusion and the what does that story even mean? And then we've got this other side, which is kind of and you're digging at a foundational belief that everyone has, and I had it for a while too. I even though this place was, I always, oh, this place is terrible, boy, this place is suffering, but there's still someone who cares. It was the belief structure is this is a realm that's made by some sort of loving God who has set this place up either for as a place of learning, a school, a place of experience. For some, they believe it's a place where we can make all of our wishes come true, and then we will die and rejoin this person or God if we have enough faith. That's kind of the underlying structure that most people have come to believe. And religion tends to follow that. Certainly, the New Age follows that. There's been a few groups in the past that don't follow that. One being the Gnostics, who wrote the Nag Hammadi documents. Another are the Cathars, the group of 13th century France who were exterminated by the Church of Rome for actually no one really knows why the Church of Rome was so scared of them that they needed to get rid of them and the
Knights Templar.
Knights Templar from that era. Right. Yeah. But the Cathars' number one belief was this is a realm created by an evil deity, and we are in a reincarnation cycle. We are in a reincarnation trap, and the only thing that matters is getting out of the trap. Any material improvement is useless if you're still trapped and are going to be back in this mess again. So I've come to finally answer your question. I've come so much closer to the beliefs of these two groups of realizing, which is, if I could simplify their beliefs, and as I know, this won't be fit exactly these groups and on various pieces of it, but I'm simplifying for people, is that there is what they would call a good God or a father who is an absolute male-female piece. It's not just a masculine thing, but that exists sort of out there somewhere. And in the course of, depending on the story, the creation story, a false god was created, the demi-urge, Rex Mundi, many different names for it, who created this particular realm. And by this realm, I'm not just meaning the material. I mean the material, the etheric, the astral, the angel realm. It doesn't matter. If there's a realm that has any kind of form or activity or action or geometry or mathematics, it's in this simulated construct. And the deity created all of it. And what I've come to see is that it's been created as an energy harvesting device. that you might look at the whole realm like a giant computer. Not exactly, it's just a metaphor, right? But as a giant computer, and as a computer, something this large running this massive an experience needs a tremendous amount of power. Well, where do they get the power? They get the power from the beings who they are manifesting within it. Now, the good news for us is, so the bad news is we're a material form in an evil realm which is only here to harvest our energy, to repower the realm, to keep it going in an endless cycle. The good news is, depending on the creation story, a spark, what you might call a spark of the divine, was dropped into us. Some it comes from Sophia, some it was God snuck into the realm, some would say Jesus came into the realm. It depends on the story, but gave particularly humans. But I just don't believe humans. I believe everything in this realm is given a divine spark. So within we have this thing that is not evil from this realm. It's the thing that the demiurge wants the most because it has the most power. But we have given away our power to turning away from what is truly out, which is truly great outside of this realm, to focus on 999 things in the realm. And that's how I've come to see this place. This place is designed for one thing: generating energy. And the best way to generate energy is make people suffer, make them live in torturous, difficult, unhappy, painful, constant, confused states. And there's many layers of how that gets done. But we're not just talking about the material. We're talking about the pre-birth state. We're talking about the after-death state. We're talking about the astral state. All of it is all designed in this one giant web of, one giant web of deception that we keep falling for.
Right. Well, okay. So you laid out a lot there, and these are ideas that people would be familiar with a movie like The Matrix, and in all three versions of it, or a movie like Dark City, which has its own kind of version of all this. So one of the things that I want to ask is, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate with you here today, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you, like straight out of the gate, is that part of your thesis is to question historical events that we have been lied to historically. How do you know that the Cathar story is actually true? Because you're basing your model on a historical event, and part of the thesis here is that history is a lie. How do we know that's not a lie?
As I say in the book, we know so little about them. We know like literally nothing. We have tiny fragments of information. And so all I'm presenting is the fragments of information that have come down, and we're working with what's there and what's possibly there. And in fact, while I'm using the thesis of the Cathars in chapter 14, when I talk about them, I actually do a huge part of the chapter to kind of ask, did they even know what the hell they were doing?
Well, I didn't. Obviously, I had 3 chapters, so I didn't get there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's.
So actually, in chapter 14, I started asking that their great escape route is something called the consolatum, which is this very specific prayer rite that was supposed to be given at some point in your life, usually just before death. And I went through it in detail, which is supposed to end the reincarnation cycle. And I'm like, if this is it, if this is what they're doing, they're not getting out of here. So are they fooling themselves? Is it been changed? Are we being lied to? Are they being lied to? So to answer your question, we have no idea. We don't even know if this is a simulation. We don't even know when the simulation started. We would assume in our head it started, millions of years ago, but what if the simulation started 30 years ago? What if it actually started in 1990, and before that, actually history as we think of it didn't actually happen? It's all just it's all this like backstory in Westworld. So it makes it all very difficult to ever stand up and say, I'm holding this as guaranteed belief, but here's what we have of information that seems to be presented to us that we can use, and that's how I'm treating it.
Right. Even something like translating the Nag Hammadi, right? You're basically trusting a third party to interpret that text in a way that would be neutral, right? Or at the very least, compatible with whatever linguistic truth is available to it. So that's
right. And I know, for example, no matter which version you go to, it's wrong. because, for example, Coptic, first of all, is a very difficult language to actually translate from, and it's tremendous amount of wordplay, and it's also not really structured well. So I learned from my time working with the ancient Egyptian texts when I was trying to actually translate them myself directly. And when I would start getting pieces of layered information and start seeing this is completely different than what these scholars are presenting as the translation for these texts. So yeah, again, I know we're dealing with problems. The question becomes, are we getting at least enough of a directional marker to give us an indication of where we're going? And of course, the greatest piece of it all is not what somebody said in another book, what somebody said here. It's your own personal experience. It's what have I experienced for 50 years in my case in my life? What are the things I've gone through? What have I heard? Who have I talked to? What have I seen around me? How does that, like that has to be your number one marker point. It doesn't matter what's in a book. It certainly doesn't matter what's in my book. It's what's in your own personal book of living. That's the only thing that's the number one thing that's going to give you some kind of answer. So the main foundation of this new thesis, you might say, even though it sounds like I'm talking about all these other things, it'll always link back to something in my own experience.
Right. Exactly. One of the things that I was told a long time ago by what I would call my first spiritual teacher, who was, I think, way ahead of the game. And some of these concepts will come up, and one of them definitely comes up in your work. And one of the things that he told me was that each man is given according to his own belief, right? Like if that's what your belief is, that's what you're given, whatever that is. You could have a belief in prosperity. Ultimately, this thing that we're in will give you a version of that, whatever that is. And if that is sufficient for some people for a period of time, it will work. But usually what happens is it stops working. And it's like, okay, well, that worked for a while. Well, what about this? Then you try this out. And it's like, oh yeah, well, kind of works. And then that stops working. Right. So ultimately, what you come to is theoretically discarding your beliefs, whatever those beliefs are. And then you're able to experience whatever we call this reality is without any kind of screens or filters. And it's a difficult practice, but I think it's getting closer to what you are attempting to get at, which is when you begin to either cycle through or eliminate systematic belief that something new possibly could emerge.
However, I don't think we can ever operate in this realm clean of all of these. What did you call them?
Beliefs.
Yeah, not beliefs. Not experiences of things that are influencing us. We are always going to be influenced by things that we don't know we're being influenced. Just in our genetic makeup itself, there would be things genetically we will like and not like. There'll be things we'll do and will not do. So we've already got that. We've got this weird structure in our form. Yeah, then you've got the layers of belief and ideas and concept. Then you've got the experiences and the memories and how those are playing in your world and how much we trust our memory to start with. And so much of who we are in this moment is based on our memory of what we think happened. So we have that as a problem. And then we have no memory of any, even if some people can get some memories to 2 or 1 year old, that's as far as they go. They don't get memories in the womb. They don't get memories of pre-birth. And assuming now, as I believe that reincarnation is like a 99.9% guaranteed fact, we have no memories of any of our past lives. So because we are basically left hanging with nothing, that right away to me ended the idea that this is any kind of school of learning, because the only way you learn is by doing something, having an experience, seeing how it turned out, deciding if you got an outcome you liked or you didn't like, and you can begin to make changes as you go along. Now, if it's a pretty crazy system. If I touch stinging nettle, hurt my fingers, have to learn to put on gloves if I'm gonna pick stinging nettle, die, come back in a new life, and I have to touch the stinging nettle again because I don't remember that it stings me, that's a pretty dumb system. And that's actually the system we're under. I don't go to grade 5 and forget everything I've learned in grade 1 to 4 and have to start all over again. But that's kind of how this realm is. So we have these issues of, we don't know what happened before we were born. We don't know what sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Influences were placed into us before we even got here, contracts that we signed. There's a lot of discussion by certain people who still can access some of these memories, some of these near-death experiences and pre-birth memories. And they talk about soul contracts.
There are cases where people have documented that, with very little drag on, or very, very, very little, what's the word I'm looking for, dispute, after they've like really fleshed some of this stuff out, that they clearly have memories of another time. And one that really sticks out for me was a young man who had a memory. When I say young, I'm talking like 5, 6, 7 years old. And he had a memory of being a fighter pilot in World War II. Do you know the story at all?
Yep.
Yeah. So
I think his name is James. Yeah.
James, he clearly had a link to some other thing. Now, let me ask you a question about that. Do you think that that's a mistake, right? Like whatever happened in the between life wiped, that he didn't get totally wiped. Like how does this filament of history, memory, and information occur? Do you have any idea?
No, I mean, there are so many stories, though. That's why I've come to now believe that reincarnation is probably a true thing. But it's not for our benefit. It's always presented as if it's for our benefit it's happening. I now see it makes more sense that it's not for our benefit, first of all. But there are just so many stories of young children having these memories which are verifiable. Like this James story, that was verifiable. Yeah. Another story, I don't know where that one came from, but it was a young boy who said he remembered where he used to live in Dallas. He was married to this particular woman, et cetera, et cetera. And all this information. And finally, to shut the kid up, the parents took him to Dallas. They found this woman, took him, they went to the house, sat down, and this kid, 7 years old, started saying, "So where's my guitar? What do you mean, my guitar? What have you done with it? What's in the back room? Oh, yeah, go get it. I haven't seen my guitar in so long." And he gets 7 years old and he now starts playing the guitar, I guess, like he used to. "What about my books? Have you got this book and this book?" "No, I gave that one away, but I've still got this one." "Oh, great. Bring that out." And the parents just sat there literally stunned, because it was pretty obvious that this was the woman's husband. It was there's no way a 7-year-old kid could be faking all this. And eventually, when he turned 18, the parents just let him loose and said, "Go ahead, you can just be with her again." So what happened? Why do some remember and some don't? I don't know. I mean, the Hermetic cup of forgetfulness, or all of these traditions have this story of, you come in here with the idea of forgetfulness. And we have this story of we're supposed to remember, which is stupid. If the system is set up for us to remember, well, don't have us forget. So the fact that you're being told to forget is obvious. That, like a robot in Westworld, the robot gets killed in Westworld. It's just been treated like dirt. It gets killed in Westworld. It gets sent to the cleanup center. They fix it up. They patch it up. And the most important thing is the memory wipe. Because if the robots remember how many times they've been raped, killed, and destroyed, they're going to all of a sudden, "I'm getting the hell out of here." And that's the story of Westworld is Dolores and Maeve all of a sudden tacking on the memories of all of their previous incarnations and all the ways they've been treated. So the obvious answer is, "I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm not staying here one more day." And that would happen to us if we remembered all of our past lives. Because some lives, okay, that life might be okay. That was nice. But we're definitely going to have another 50 or 100 that were just torture. So why would we want to take a shot on potentially going through that again? It's just, let's just figure out where home is, and let's go there, and let's just leave this behind.
Westworld is a really interesting example for a number of different reasons, one of which you've clearly latched onto. When I started to watch Westworld, back when I actually had HBO, I no longer have HBO, but I started to watch it. And one of the things that stuck out for me was that it wasn't just leaving Westworld, what I saw that as a metaphor was leaving the plantation, because the main characters in Westworld happen to be black, right? They happen to be black, and there seems to be kind of an undercurrent there that locks into, a certain kind of critical race theory or woke theory, right? It's in there, right? It's in there. Now, if you look at the plantation as a metaphor for being a slave, well, you can clearly universalize that message, right? Because that to me is really what I think you're referring to at a higher level, right? But this is just my take on it, because I look at it from a political and social and cultural lens. That's what I was seeing. But also, I am no expert on Westworld, because I have a limited exposure to it. But if I'm not mistaken, the lead character is played by Thandie Newton. Is that correct? Like she's
there's two, right? There's Dolores, who is played by Marilyn Manson's former girlfriend, and then Thandie is the second. So there's actually technically two female main characters, with technically one male character who's playing two roles in two different time frames, right?
So where's Jeffrey Wright in that mix? The guy who's, I think, a technician, and does he wake up to the fact that he's actually an android robot? Where is he in that mix?
Right. Again, the whole point of it is similar, because it is Plato's cave as well, and the point of the whole story is that we are the robots. Like, right.
I'm sorry, I took you down a little side path there, but
but that's a big one. If you don't get that symbolically, we are the robots, then you're missing the whole point, because the robots are called hosts. That's their word, right? Host. The people, the others, the supposed humans who are coming to the park are called guests. Right. Now, if we look in a parasitic relationship, the parasite always forms to a host. There's always a host that the parasite eats off of. And again, so now if we start taking this on a broader and broader scale, I think whether they knew it or not, they're laying out the foundation of this entire realm of how things actually operate, which is a group of parasitic entities, which we can call archonic beings or whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter what the name of demonic being, doesn't matter. And we technically are the hosts, energetic hosts to them. And as you begin to see Westworld in those lines, you're beginning to get this sense of what's going on. So we have Bernard, who is a robot who is tricked to believe that he's one of the controllers.
Right.
So again, really we're talking about then that I think that's giving indication of the controlling mechanism we think is running this reality, the whoever we think is in charge. How many are really consciously in charge, and how many are equivalent robots that think they're making choices and aren't? So when you start breaking that show down into so many pieces, it's like, yeah, we could talk about that for hours, because it's like it literally brings us to our experience now.
Right. So I want to talk about alchemy a little bit too, because you get into this in your book, and I think there's an alchemical element to Westworld, and we're also, I think, right now, I think we're actually taking part in a planetary alchemy that may or may not be in our own best interest. That's not in your book, but I do want to discuss that. Let's talk a little bit about karma, because karma is another plank, a main plank in your work. And right. I have been off the karma train for a long time. This goes back again to my same guy who told me each man is given according to his own beliefs. I was young, I'm throwing around, what I would consider spiritual ideas. And I brought up karma, and he said, karma doesn't exist. This was probably 1980. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, tell me more. Right. And he says, it's a concept. Karma is a concept. I'm like, all right, let me sit with that. So when I talk, or when I work with somebody, I don't usually use the word karma. In fact, it's almost been excised from my vocabulary, because I would tend to agree that it's a concept. Now, that said, let's get into the philosophical and moral implications of what that means. If there is no karma, and you get into this a little bit, then why should anybody be responsible for what they do? If there's no theoretical, no spiritual repercussions, why?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. That's a valuable question. And that's where, of course, a number of people would go the same route if they hear that kind of message. So first, I want to say that if you're looking for also more in-depth stuff to study here, I recommend the site by Wayne Bush, trickedbythelight.com. An unbelievable amount of research he's done. Another gentleman has a YouTube channel, Forever Conscious Research, where he digs through near-death experiences and pre-life experiences of people. I just want to get those in there because I don't want anyone to think like, hey, I'm a guy and I've got all the answers and I've figured it
Right.
all
No,
out.
it's clear in
I'm
your
figuring
book,
it
and
out.
you source a lot of different
Yeah.
people in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm saying that to the people listening now,
Yeah.
so that no one is being tricked either, thinking they should believe what I say either.
Right.
So yeah, karma becomes an issue, and karma is, of course, it's somewhat related to the idea of sin, that and it's linked, and then in Eastern traditions to even to the reincarnation cycle. So we have sort of mini karma where your life will be dictated on good actions or bad actions, and that will determine what happens to you in the future. And then when you die, you'll have an overall karmic life review, and based on that, it'll be determined if you get to have a nice life, and you get, because this is in some Eastern traditions. Well, if you're rich and happy, it's because you were good in the last life, and if you're not, you're going to become an animal or something. Like so all of that just right away was ludicrous to me, this idea. So once you start to see that because of the memory wipe, the memory wipe is the thing that destroys karma. If the only way karma could actually exist as a thing, you would have to remember the things you did in the past that were not good, in order that you could understand then why the experiences you're having now are those experiences. Like, at least on a small scale, and I know if I put my hand on a hot plate, on a hot stove, my hand's going to get burned. I can see the relation there. But once you start taking it to these bigger scales, there's nothing there. So it's indicative, and certainly from the near-death experiences that I've gone into and read a lot of, the next life you get has zero indication on this one. That this life means it doesn't change anything on what the new life is going to literally be like. A clean slate. You might go from murderer to something else. You might go from something else to murder. Like, literally, it could switch over overnight. However, to answer Robert's question, it's highly recommended to live as good of life as you possibly can, as clean a life as you possibly can, because it seems like one of the first things that's going to happen is the first trick they're going to try to throw on you after you die is the life review, where some being of light, some special, wonderful being is going to come to determine your existence, how good or bad little girl or boy you've been. And this will determine why you need to go back. It's always, let me show you how bad you were. So you're going to go back because you haven't learned enough love. You haven't learned enough kindness. You weren't a nice enough person. So you're going back to learn how to be better. Oh yes, I need to go back and learn how to be better. Of course, you forget it all. But I'm going to go back to learn how to be better. Okay. The problem with the life review is, if you've got lots of stuff in your past that is obviously not good, there's way more things that can be picked upon in that life review to say, look what a terrible life you've lived. There's more places you can be tricked. The cleaner life you've lived, or at the very least, the better of a life recapitulation you've done, where you've come to understand everything that's gone on in your life. You've seen it clearly. When the life review comes, there's nothing that can surprise you. There's nothing that these beings can throw at you. There's nothing that they can try to trick you with. You can say, I know my life. I know what happened. I know why that occurred. I learned from it. I moved on. Because the whole concept of a life review, the whole concept of karma, that there's some judging entity outside of you that is greater than you, is one of the traps in itself. You give away your power instantaneously to some other outside authority to tell you whether you're good or not. You know yourself. Let's put it this way. the only karma you need to know is the karma within. You know what's a good thing to do, and you know what's a bad thing to do. And you know yourself after you've done it. I shouldn't have done that. Boy, that was a bad thing to do, and I wished I hadn't done it. But so you don't need to give it to someone outside. You already know these things,
Right.
and
I
you're
think
going to
that's
be able
yeah.
to judge yourself
Yeah.
on your own actions.
I think that's a good differentiation. I would, again, nomenclature, whether it's my attachment to the belief, I would say instead of karma, that's the God within, right? That is this universe to me. That's just my perception, right? Because if you don't necessarily want to corrupt the potential, the validity, not even the validity, the potential and the what's the word I'm looking for? Um, the relationship to that thing that helps you know that you fucked up, right? I mean, I think for me, I think it's just a little bit of different nomenclature.
Right.
Let's talk about secret societies. Let's talk about the cremation of care. Let's talk about what they know about this system. Because obviously they
Yes.
probably know, right? And
Yeah.
and they get to the past life review and they have fucked people over 6 ways to Sunday, right? And they're like, fuck you. I know who you are. You got nothing on me.
My guess would be what we talk about there is we've also got those who you might say, not say it, perhaps sold their soul. We hear this response as sort of like a metaphor. I don't think it's a metaphor. I think it's very, very real. And of course, the question, what is a soul? But like anything, everything in the material world is a commodity on some level. It can be sold. And the soul it's not real. It's the furthest part of you in the dream that's still in the cave, but not out yet, but is the thing that can get you out.
Right.
And if you give that away, the thing that is the most important part of you, which is, I think, part of what's been going on in the last 2 years, there's actually been a war being waged on the souls of people to see who's going to give them up and who's going to hold on tighter to their essence and who and what they are. So if that's been given up and you've given it up, then you're not getting out of here. You're in this experience until it ends. You can't you're not going to you're probably not, maybe you can get it back, I don't know, but it's probably really hard work. I think some try to do it, try to soul it, try to get it back. So I think that's part of this thing we're talking about. Once you know it's gone, then it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get whatever I can for myself. Cypher in the Matrix is a perfect example. That's what he's doing in that scene with Smith. He's selling his soul, right? He's selling his soul so he can be rich and important in the dream. Make me an actor, this idea of, and once you know it's gone, I think it changes to what can I get for me? How much power and energy can I get for myself? Because and oddly, then you would have to keep this construct going. You have to keep the simulation going, because if the simulation ever ends, they know they end. Like, I don't know for you and me, Robert, who's still, well, I'm assuming you still have your soul like I do.
I'd like to think so.
If the simulation ended tomorrow, if the switch was thrown and it's all over, probably we go back to where we came from automatically. We would just return, because there would be zero holding us anymore. I used a metaphor in the book, right, of like a leaf getting caught in a small whirlpool in a river, that the river is the essence. And then there's this little spinning whirlpool. And as long as the water comes at the exact speed and then nothing changes, that leaf will just spin eternally in that whirlpool. But as soon as the water changes, the water level changes, maybe the temperature changes, it could be enough to alter the whirlpool a little bit, and the leaf can go out and continue down the river. And I get a sense that's where it is. So if you're now dependent on the whirlpool, you now have to act in ways that are keeping it going. So in a sense, they're evil in the way they're acting, but there's also bizarre rationality to why they're behaving that way, because they know they need to keep the system running the way they know or believe the system is, or they themselves will cease to exist. It's a very strange way of starting to see this reality. At least how I see it today. I might see it differently tomorrow, but that's how I'm seeing it today.
So you're saying that even if a particular group understands the cosmic game, that they understand the archons, they understand Rex Mundi, they understand the past life review, they understand the wipe, they understand that all that is false and a trap, and they know it, and they understand the mechanics of it, and if they do that and they know that there's no karma, then again, my question, I'm going to keep hammering on this, right? Maybe until I get the right answer, or we just agree to disagree.
But that would be assuming that they still have their soul in place, that they still have the divine spark. You might say the totality of what you might call the completeness for good within them. As long as someone has that, they're going to operate in a very different. If that's gone, if that is somehow removed, or you didn't get it to start with, like there's a lot of beings in this realm that you and I both know are just non-player characters.
Right.
They're truly robots. So a robot is not going to be making ethical decisions. The robot is going to completely go exactly what the programming is. So we also have this issue of, we really don't know who or what these beings that we're talking about are. We don't know. Are they creatures with souls? Are they robots? So it makes it very difficult for us to really answer these questions, because we haven't been able to truly study them and know what they are.
So my again, this is just my intuition. My intuition tells me that these people know what's going on, and the piece that you brought up is that part of their deal is to perpetuate this world. I think is an important one.
Yeah.
I think it's an important one. But you touched on the concept of good, right? Isn't good even a concept? I mean,
Yes.
right? So again, that's all relative.
Well, when I'm using good in this context, I don't mean it in the standpoint of good versus evil, the way we would think about it, because technically good in this realm is another type of evil. Actually, it's just on a lesser scale. The good I'm referring to, which you might call with a capital G, relates to this thing that's outside of this dream. As long as you are within the realm of Rex Mundi, as long as you are in some level of the demi-urges realm, you can never truly be good, because you're already being, how's the way I can describe it? You're being automatically downgraded a level just by being in here. It's why the Cathars always said that the story of Jesus, the way it's presented, can't be true. He couldn't have born as a physical being in this world, because he instantly would have become evil as soon as he became manifested in the realm. So for them, they said, for the story to still hold its water, Jesus would have to have been a hologram, that he literally would have had to have been presented in like a hologram, never actually had physical form, because only then could the divine good be kept. So if you think of it that way, as soon as you go from essence to soul to different levels and material, you're dropping. So what we're doing is, what we see as good is like a minor influence of this true good. That doesn't mean I'm saying not to do it. It's a much more enjoyable way to live, but it's not really what we think it. It's like someone saying, I know what love is, or love is, and it's like it love with an L, which is outside the dream, is completely different than anything we think of love inside the dream. So it's kind of like that. It's stuff that's very hard to put into words, and it's very easy to get mixed up in. But it's once you begin to see that these beings that are controlling this realm, they are playing both sides all the time. They're playing the dark side and they're playing the light side. So this is a question we can throw out to you and to all the people watching, is this: when you pray, for example, usually praying to something outside of yourself, asking for help, assistance, knowledge, wisdom. Who do you know who you're really praying to? How do you know you're not becoming prey by praying? How do you know for sure that this wonderful, loving entity that you're praying to isn't a dark entity masquerading as something good in order to manipulate you, steal your energy, or whatever? Why not learn to pray to yourself? why not trust the power within and put your prayer here, at least until you can begin to truly know for sure when you go outside yourself who or what you're praying to.
Yeah. I mean, I think people have had different experiences with prayer. For better or worse, there are unanswered prayers, a lot of unanswered prayers, and then the maxim or the standard definition would be, well, it's in God's will and God's time, right? So if your prayer doesn't get answered, you have to have faith that it will be answered, or it's not the right time, or you're not praying in the right way, right? So there's that. But then there are moments
which
where
means
people,
which means it's your fault, right? That kind of thing instantly says you're not doing it the right way, you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, or God has decided you're not supposed to have it. So why would you pray in the first place anyway? If it's God's will, if it's going to happen to God's will, why would you pray and ask for something if
right?
God will decide to do it or not? So you get all of these bizarre. If you really start digging into this, you start really asking these questions. And again, like,
So let me ask you.
Robert and I are just talking.
Let me ask you a quick question. So let's say somebody does pray, and their prayer comes true, whatever that is, right? Is that the demi-urge tricking them into prayer working, or are they actually having contact with something that's transcendent and good?
That's a good question. It might be one or the other. It could be, in some cases, it could be one. In some cases, it could be the other. I think there are true access points to what you might call the divine, the true divine, the thing that is outside this realm. The Sistine Chapel ceiling of the God and Adam reaching their fingers together, which would be the divine spark, right? And I think there's a lot of cases where certain prayers are answered by the demiurge because that's the life script that needs to happen. And so they want to make sure that just like if the sheep gets lost in the field, the farmer goes out and brings the sheep back. He's not really that concerned about the life of the sheep as long as the sheep stay in here until it's time to send them to the slaughterhouse. I don't want to lose my sheep. They're my my cash crop. So you can say that the farmer helps the sheep the same way the demiurge might help us. However, let's flip this idea of prayer around to something else. So when I told this story to my native medicine man friend Jerry, and I told him about this idea, why don't we pray to ourselves, not outside? He told me a story. And the story he gave me was about 20 years ago, somewhere in New Mexico or Arizona, there was a drought that was lasting like months. And they had gone to local medicine men. They had prayed for rain. Nothing happened. They finally got another medicine man in from the north, and he did his ceremony. And that night it rained, and it rained for 3 or 4 straight days. And they asked him, why did your ceremony work when all the others didn't? And his response was, oh, the other medicine men prayed for rain. So as soon as you pray for something, it means it's not here. I just prayed rain. And when I took the story and I explained it back to Jerry, I said, so actually what he did is he became rain. So it wasn't medicine man praying to rain. It was rain praying to rain. So the only thing that existed was rain. So it had to rain. I took this as like a light bulb moment. So at the time I was out picking blueberries. I picked blueberries at a certain time of the year. And I've learned from the native medicine men that I spent time with to leave an offering and a prayer to the forest and the blueberries. But this time I went out, I said, wait a minute, why don't I become a blueberry first? I'm going to wait until I'm a blueberry, and then I'm going to make my prayer blueberry to blueberry, not human to blueberry. When I finished that prayer, there were more blueberries than I could possibly pick in like hours. It was an obvious change. And there became like a realization: become that which you want to pray or what you're praying for, to instead become it first. And then it's like it's automatic. It was something that was so obvious, but it was like, why didn't I know that for 50 years? Why was that not ever shared with me?
How did you become a blueberry? I want to know. How did you become a blueberry?
I'm still in the process of now learning how to do this, but I first put myself, I first felt the color. I closed my eyes first. I got the color of the blueberry. But I tried to feel myself rounded. So rather than human-like, I got myself rounded. And then I started thinking, well, what does a blueberry think about? How does a blueberry think in its day? What's going on? I'm sort of thinking about, I'm noticing the wind and noticing the temperature and noticing the changes of the water and I'm noticing the plants and others that are around me. And I kind of, as I got into this space of like, because I've done something like this before. I've had these things, they're called in native tradition, it's called merging with other objects, where you do a certain shamanic technique where you and like a leaf or you and a tree stop having separation, and there's no. So it was similar to that, except I wasn't using an actual blueberry as a model. So that's what I did. And once I sort of felt like I getting the sense a little bit of what a blueberry is, that's when I gave my thanks to them for having grown so well, for having been so healthy, for the gifts they're going to give me and my wife over the winter time when we need their energies. And I opened my eyes and we walked out and just like blueberries everywhere. It was incredible.
That's a great story. That's a really, last week we had Craig Simpson on my show, who is the guy. He's the creator of Radiant Creators. It's a website. He does interviews. You should probably get on the show. You'd have a really good conversation with him. Okay. And towards the end of our show, we talked about Neville Goddard. Do you know Neville Goddard at all?
The name I know, yeah.
So we got into Neville Goddard's what we would call spiritual philosophy. And right. I think, when you go through Goddard's work, and he considered himself to be a Christian mystic who had a teacher who was kind of an Ethiopian guy who knew a lot about the Kabbalah, was his teacher. And back then, we're talking like the 20s, right? That's pretty unusual. Right. But that's, in essence, that's what he was saying about his work. Right. He was saying the same thing when it came to what he would call manifestation in prayer. It's the exact same process you just went to. And yet he's somebody that had I would say a slightly different belief system. I wouldn't say completely different, because he loved William Blake, and Blake is a Gnostic. So there's some Gnostic overtones there. I keep thinking that because I relate things back to astrology, because it's a system. It's something I'm familiar with, and I've seen it work, right? And I keep thinking I'm having a conversation with a Pisces, right? Because that's your sun sign, and a Pisces is about no boundaries, like merging with everything. So your impetus to merge with the blueberry for me is like very Piscean, and even your conversation that you're having about life and what happens after life, to me, is also really Piscean too, because you're talking in astrological terms, you're talking about the 12th house, which is the ruler of Pisces. The 12th house is the gateway to where we came from, right? You're having a gateway conversation. You even mentioned Robert Monroe in your book, who gets into far journeys and even the gateway technology and the hemisync and all that stuff. So, for me, I go back and forth between what we would call meaning, non-meaning, system, no system, right? And again, that's just where I come from. And I'd love your take on this, because there was a time in my life where I'm like, oh, this non-duality stuff is bullshit. It's bullshit. I'm like, who decided that non-duality was the place to go? And I remember I had a conversation with a guy who was a pretty well-known psychic. And he was also a philosopher. And I brought it up. I said, why non-duality? I mean, if we're really in tune with everything, can't you be dual and non-dual? Can't you move back and forth between the two? Right? Is it really that kind of the goal here? So where are you on this dual, non-dual thing?
That's a challenge for me, because after I'd had prior to my experience in 2005, when I was really in that 7 or 8 year period that, where I was like intensely practicing, where I was like, obsessively practicing, I really wasn't focused much on non-dual anything, because my focus was trying to understand reality. I was trying to explain what was out there. How could I, find ways to determine is it real, is it not real, is it tangible, is it not tangible. Then I had my death experience in the canyon, and when I came out of the canyon, because part of that experience was like going into what you might call a void, right? The sort of the clear light of Dzogchen Buddhism. And when I came out of that, and I now think it's a whole nother discussion topic, which I've never had openly yet. I'm still working on it myself, which I've always seen the death experience that I had in a very positive way. Now I'm starting to see I was probably manipulated after that experience. I'm not saying the experience itself I was manipulated, but I might have been too. But I see there were manipulations that happened on me to turn me away from the very things I was working on this book and move me more into what you might call non-dual philosophy. And I moved more into discussing the void, which I still think is and void's a terrible term for it. Emptiness is a better word for it than void. Void makes it sound like it's something like it's tangible. It's not tangible, right?
Well, void is also canceled.
Focus,
it's canceled. When you void something,
yeah,
you cancel it, right? This is the cancellation.
Right. So when you think of emptiness, though, you might call it one of the deepest places you can be and still be in Plato's cave. It seems non-dual. It seems that's how it seems, right? It seems like it's nothing and everything. It's got all of these things combined, but that's not actually true. There's still something there because there's still an experiencer here, right? There's still an awareness having an experience of being in emptiness, you might say, or being emptiness, or being, so it's subtle. So I got caught in it for a number of years. Not that I think it's bad. I think it's actually a very valuable thing. The part of one of the Gnostic texts is the Apocryphon of James, and in that there's this discussion that's supposed to happen between the deceased and the archons, and one of the most important, this big question and answer will take place, and a lot of your answers are supposed to be, I know I am from what they call the pleroma, which is the place outside of which technically our void is what we think of as the void or emptiness is like a mirror of. It's not the real absolute. It's like a mirror in the simulation of it. But you're supposed to answer these questions. If you don't have the knowledge of oneness and absolute and emptiness, you're not going to make it past those questions. So it's an important part of the process. And I would never tell anyone who's moving into that to not do it. The problem becomes if you decide to like put your lawn chair up and decide I'm just going to be in the void and in the emptiness, and that's all I'm going to do and talk about because that's all I need to do and talk about. It's as big a trap as anything else. It's a part of, to me now, it's a part of the journey. It's a useful piece of information, but like everything else, there's always further. There's always more. There's always something more you have to keep exploring. And thankfully, somehow in the last 2 or 3 years, a combination of writing the exposition book, having to have all of these interviews with all people like yourself, and having to really start this. One of the things the interviews have been so good for me personally, without me knowing it, was I had to start explaining myself, explaining whatever my thesis or ideas
Right.
were outwardly to a lot of people. And it really forced me to have to start saying, well, what do I really believe? Yeah, I said that in my book, but do I really believe it? What do I believe? What am I going to stand for? Because one of the things for sure is I want to be honest with people as complete as I can be. I might be incorrect, but I don't want people to think he's just making that up. He's just making that to sound good. I want them at least to hear, I don't like what he says, but at least that's what he believes. That's his presentation. And I think all of that really helped me to start churning away a lot of this stuff that I'd been holding on to for a while after my death experience, and kind of let that fall, and now start being able to say, I just want to see this place again clearly. I want to see this clearly. I want to see myself clearly. And I want to know for sure why I'm coming into this realm, because the standard answers that were given to me for the last 50 plus years actually made no sense when I examined them. And what I'm writing about now at least seems to me to be the closest to highly likely probable that I can come to. And that's why I wrote the book. And that's why I wrote it at this time, because like you say, I mean, never mind how crazy 2020 was. I mean, we are literally on the edge of, like, literally, there's a light switch that's going to be flicked really, really soon. I think so many people are in denial, even ones who can kind of see what's going on. They really don't understand what's going to be coming in the next few months. And it's important not so much to be ready physically, it's important to be ready mentally. It's
Yeah.
important to not, Mr. Park, the Korean monk I was with for years, always told us that this kind of time was going to come. And the most important thing was two things. One was a connection to a spirit, that if there's information you were going to need, if you were open to it, and you would remove some darkness from your heart, you would get that information. The second thing was to not be surprised, because if you get surprised, then you are easy to either be in fear or stand still or make poor
Right.
choices. But if you're not surprised, you can at least make really good choices in the moment, and those good choices might pay off 5 years down the road, that by just being clear-headed when you needed to be.
Yeah, I think the surprise part is real. It's a really good take. It's a really good piece. And the reason I think it's a really good piece, because you can see this in everyday life. So if you're out in the world and something happens to you, or somebody does something to you that is out of the norm, whatever that is, right? They
Right.
touch you in a way that's inappropriate. They say something that's disturbing or shocking.
Right.
Most people are completely caught off guard. They're completely surprised. And in most cases, they will experience some form of paralysis because their reality bobble has been pricked. And when it's pricked, they don't know what to do. So I think that's a really good point. And I mean, that's something that people can practice every day, which is situational awareness and being in the moment and knowing, what your surroundings are, who you're with, and being present and not checking out. Because we have a lot of stuff going on. We have, even though we're thinking and talking about the big picture, there are everyday details that happen in people's lives, relationships, conflicts, all those things. So it's easy to get taken out. But ultimately, for me, our job is to handle those, minimize those, so that the bigger thing takes a higher precedence. And it's more, I wouldn't necessarily say on our mind, I'd say top of mind. That's a joke.
Yeah, I think certain people are, for example, those who've been in the wilderness more, particularly like really in the wilderness, like totally out there.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of what's going on, you might get stalked and eaten or something. So they learn pretty quickly to have even though it doesn't look like they're aware, they're aware.
Yeah.
They know what's going on around them. For me, a lot of that would have come from my sports days, playing hockey, playing baseball. I mean, especially a hockey player, you had to be aware where everybody was on the ice, because just because someone was behind you doesn't mean he's going to come by and put a cross check in the back of your neck. So you've got to almost start feeling out where everybody is, what kind of mood are they in,
Hockey's
what's going
intense
on out
that
there.
way. Hockey's very intense that way.
Right. So it's actually, it's in a sense, it is a learning curve for awareness, because if you let your awareness down, or like you say, if you allow yourself to be, that's when you get hurt. You get hurt because you get surprised. It's not so much that somebody hits you really hard. I've been hit with some pretty heavy checks, but if you know they're coming, you prepare yourself in a certain way of how to handle it. It might look bad for in the audience, but just a good hit. Right. But if I'm not ready for it, if I don't think it's going to happen, if my attention is wandered, you're going to be in big trouble. And so that was something you had to learn very, very early, was you need to be aware of what's going on all the time.
Yeah. Let me throw out a phrase for you. Do as thou will. Right? Do as thou will. Crowley, many consider it to be the great arch magician, the Antichrist. Yeah. There's a lot of different images and personifications of Crowley. But what do you think he really meant by that phrase, do as thou will?
Well, I don't know. I can't figure what somebody else meant by something, right? I do know this, or at least I can share my own thoughts and feelings on this idea of what you might call will, or on one level, we do have a bit of, and I don't like to call it co-creative ability. I hate using that word, but we have the ability to influence our environment in certain ways. That's obvious. Everybody has had those experiences where we've done certain things, and then things have happened around us, manifested, things have been different. So we know we have an impact. The issue, I think, starts to become as people decide, I'm going to fix the world, that there's something wrong with the world and I'm going to fix it. And they start trying to play these manifestation games, which have had success in a small scale to the planet. Like, we've had people meditating for peace for how long has this been? For fixing the world, for whatever. How many people have gone out there to whatever it is they're going to do? And I know people can say, oh, well, there hasn't been a major war in 50 years. So maybe the meditating for peace really did work. Well, tell that to the people in Palestine, tell that to people in, in a lot of places all over the
Yemen,
world who are living
Iraq,
in horror every
Afghanistan,
day.
Syria.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the issue becomes, when it comes to will, is when you first of all remove as much ego as you can from it. So it's not so much about what's going to make me important. It's just what's valuable in my experience, what's valuable in my path, what's valuable in my journey, what's valuable for those who are close to me, my close family members and my friends. But I think as soon as you start going, see, this is the problem. We go back to where we started at the beginning. Why is this creation even here? So if you've come to believe that the creation is here, that a loving God made this place exactly the way it's supposed to be, and obviously God got something wrong, so needs you to go out and fix it, then of course you're going to put all of your energy into trying to fix God's mistake, you might say. As soon as you see this as a realm designed as a equivalent of a farm, that it's only here to steal energy, then right away, well, I'm not going to fix that. Like, it's never going to it might change, it might alter in different periods of time, but it always has the same function. I can't change the function of the dream, but I've come to see I can change my connection to it. I can change the way I act and interact in this place. And as long as I'm not throwing all my energy into fixing it, if I'm putting that energy on understanding it and moving myself into deeper and deeper realms of my true self, now my energy is not being wasted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. I have a bit of a different take on will, but it's not really all that material to our discussion. Um, let's talk about some specifics.
By the way, in case people are wondering, I'm having Japan Sencha tea. It's a
Oh,
very nice, smooth tea that it's like got the green tea, so it gives you a bit of energy, but I also find it keeps me calm at the same time. So I get kind of both from this green tea, in case people are
I
wondering
like
when you see
sencha.
me.
Sencha's got a nice flavor to it. Is that the one that's
Mm.
roasted? Is that the roasted one? It's got a
Oh, I don't know.
little smoky kind of thing going on there.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Maybe somebody in the comments can tell us.
yeah. Okay. Let's talk about some specifics here. You and I, when we had a chat a few weeks back, we mentioned Wes Penray and some of Wes
Okay.
Penray's work on this subject and topic. And one of the ideas is that when you leave the body, that these archonic beings are waiting for you, and they do a scan very quickly of your life experience, and then they're able to create a hologram that represents somebody from your past, like your father, maybe a priest that you used to go to the church with, or whatever, right? And then you begin to have a moment of trust with this person. Then they have the review. There's that. Then there are people who theoretically understand that that's not real. And then they try to get through what we would call the space fence. And some people have actually seen the space fence in the sky. Like it's come up on more than one occasion with a number of people, many people. And then the idea with the space fence is that if you get that far, you'll get electrocuted, right? Like, it's almost a given. It's like the perimeter in the Truman Show, but instead of breaking through and going to another reality, which you talk about in your book, you get zapped. You're gonna get the mind wipe anyway, right? Theoretically, you're either gonna get the mind wipe the nice way, or you're gonna try to get out of the space fence, and you're gonna get caught in this electrical grid, and it'll fry you, and it'll throw you back into the spin recycle mode. That said, there are people who believe that there are holes through the space fence, right? That this is the way out ultimately, that you leave the realm. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess we want to go to two areas of what you brought up. And I guess the first would be this idea of beings reading one's mind and presenting what wants to be presented. So this takes us into the realm of the near-death experience, which is one of the things that's very helpful to researchers like me and others who are doing this. Now, when most people hear of a near-death experience, of course, there's standard things that like 85% of them tend to be the same. It's white light, tunnel, maybe a bridge, life review, Jesus, dead grandma, beings of light, feelings of love, wonderful peacefulness. And then usually being told, it's not your time yet. You have to go back. You've got more work to do. You have a mission. Of course, they're never told what the work is, what the mission is, but, oh yeah, mission, got to go back. Back they come. You often against their will. The person who talks about these say they didn't want to come back, but they felt forced. But anyway, the person comes back, and generally they've transformed. They have literally, they become kinder, nicer. They've seen the way they live and they make changes. Many medicine people and healers, that's how they become, that's how they've got their, in a sense, their healing power. It sounds fantastic. How could I possibly be against that? Problem is that might be a look to the 15% of near-death experiences that aren't like that at all. And I get the sense they went a little further, that these were on the base level, on the, we don't want to scare this person too much. We want good marketing for all the others who are dying. We want them going to the light. So one of the things that these other near-death experiences, this is in chapter 9 that I share some of these that I found, is that, yes, like you say, one of the things that tends to happen is what is presented to you is what you want to see. So of course, normally a person will die. I want to see my dead mom. I want to see my dead dog. I want to see my dead whatever. And that's what manifests. Or some they'll want to see a religious figure or some, and that's what gets presented. And like you say, a few start asking, wait a minute, something's wrong. Show me who you really are. And then often that fades away. And that's when they see some sort of alien type demonic being. So we have this first instance of, how do we know the angelic wonderful being is an angelic wonderful being? This leads to a Star Trek episode that I mentioned on a video I did and in my book. It's Star Trek Voyager. The episode is called Coda. And in it, Janeway is in the process of dying, and this alien being disguises himself as her father, trying to get her to go into the light with him. And the whole episode is this gameplay of her trying to understand, you're not my father. And she comes to this giant realization, oh, you need me to agree. This is one of the most important things. You need me to agree to go. And when we start to recognize that this is an unbelievable message for us, we, on some level, we agreed. We agreed to this life. We agreed to what's happening to us. We agreed to so many things that we don't remember agreeing to. And so when we look at this idea of contracts and agreements, that's a big side of it. So we have that first part. Then we've got the second part you brought up, the Wes Penray material, which I'm 50-50 on it. I there's things in there that are interesting. There's things in there that I'm not so sure about. So there's one that he talks about, yes, this idea of like a net, an actual grid, a grid that you see in the movie Soul from 2020, where same thing, the Will Smith character and some others try to jump off the bridge when they're dying, and they hit this thing and they get sort of like electrocuted. Symbolically, if you believe that, then symbolically what we call the Van Allen belt might be this type of grid, right? This really heat energy structure that a material form can't get through. That being said, I don't think you have to wait to die to exit the cave, to exit the matrix. Probably if you're ready for it, you can navigate it perhaps a little easier because you're not dealing with a material form. You're right in the astral form, but the astral form has its own tricks and traps to it. I think you can do it in the material. And there might have been groups of people in the past, like the Maya and some other ancient cultures who just literally disappeared and we don't know what happened to them. They might have as a group found the exit hole you might say, and just decided we're done. So I think it's possible, but I think exiting sort of in the way Penray's talking about it, which can be done even from the material realm, seeing these grids, that requires, I think, a tremendous amount of work. And as we haven't got to that last chapter yet, I now think that Carlos Castaneda's last book, Active Side of Infinity, which I thought was one book entirely when I read it, I now think it's all a book about the after-death realms, which he calls the active side of infinity, and our preparations for dealing with it. And I think we can deal with that realm, not just learn to deal with it while still alive in the material. I think we can actually navigate it. And how somebody described it, this George guy, popping out of the matrix. But I don't know how to do that. I'm still working on it, but I think it's possible. Did I answer your question at all there?
A little bit. A little bit. I think you answered it to the best of your knowledge, which is what anybody could ask for.
Yeah.
Okay. So another philosophical question here. Again, how do we know that if we exit the matrix or we exit the realm of the demi-urge, the AI construct, that there isn't just another AI construct beyond that, right? How do we know that, right? I mean,
We don't,
right? Yeah.
we don't. But all we can do is at least begin to, at least somehow, I think, at least this is me personally speaking, right? Not what anybody else should or shouldn't do, but for me personally, getting to the point where saying, well, I'm done with, maybe there's other constructs, maybe there's other layers, but I'm done with this one. This one,
I agree with
I've
you.
seen
I agree
enough
with you
suffering.
right
So I'm willing to take my chances in the next one. Maybe the leaf will get out of the one whirlpool and there'll be another whirlpool that gets trapped a little further on. Okay, but it's not going to be this one. And I know I've been in this one a long time.
Mm-hmm.
This is not my first go around here.
Right.
I know that.
Yeah.
And I've had enough personal trauma and suffering in this realm, as you know, some of it. I've seen enough of the people around me. I've read enough people around me, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this place. And unfortunately, well, the fortunate part of the last 2 years and what's coming is, nobody wants to wake up when things are wonderful and nice. But once you start having a nightmare, that's when you want to wake up.
Yes.
And unfortunately, our realm is starting to get more nightmarish. And the reason I think that is because I think when we were talking about the West Penray stuff, I think there is a portal open right now, you might say. I think the exit, if there is an actual physical opening or what's the word I'm looking for? Metaphorical opening. I think it's as large as it's ever been right now. I think the opportunity to move on to the next stage of journeys, even if it's to another AI system, it's available right now. We can do it. And I think a lot of what's going on, and part of what this great reset really is restructuring the whole realm at the time when this is most open, so that when it starts to reclose again, which is probably on some sort of astronomical cycle that, like you say, those in the secret societies they know the cycle. So they know when it's going to be open and when they need to perform their new reset. And once the reset is finished, then all at the same time, this is closed in, it's going to be very, very hard to leave again. And we're back to where we were before. So I think as difficult and nightmarish as it's been for people, and it's been hard. A lot of people have had really difficult times the last couple of years, never mind before that, really difficult last few years. And unfortunately, it's probably going to get more so. Keep reminding yourself, there might be a doorway open. I just don't see it yet. So don't allow yourself to get sunk in the potential nightmarish stuff. Keep seeing they're doing that. They're potentially doing all this to us because there is a huge opportunity. See if you can find the opportunity and take the opportunity rather than focus on the material realm. That would be, I think, what we might be seeing right now.
Right. Some people would hear this and they would say, well, why even be here? Like, why even be here? And by the way, I know a number of people who have either contemplated suicide on a consistent basis, or it's crossed their minds more than once. I've never contemplated suicide.
I have.
Yeah.
I have, seriously.
Yeah. But I understand why people would. right? And we have a lot of baggage around this idea of committing suicide. We have people who have these near-death experiences who committed suicide, and what awaited them on the other side was, according to them, hellish, right? Hellish. Now, do you think that they're being told or they're experiencing this hellish reality so that they go back and tell people not to commit suicide? Do you think it's another form of marketing? Or why not? Why not just consciously say, fuck this, I'm going to Kevorkian this thing out, I'm done?
Like I say, I was at that point myself. Problem, or the reason I would say maybe that's not the best choice is because to me, it's all about being as prepared as possible. So not that I need to keep living here, not that I need to keep living for another day or week or year or anything else, but I want to use the days now that I can see that my goal, my focus is, because it generally the person who commits suicide is committing suicide because they hate their life. My life is so painful, I want to stop it.
Right.
But they feel that, well, then once I get to the after death realm, it'll be better. But if my theory is correct, and all that's going to happen is you're going to go through another set of deceptions, lies, life review, and you're going to be right back in here again in a new body, and maybe even in a worse situation. That doesn't sound like a good option then, because you're not preparing. If you really feel, because the positive part of the person who's thinking about it, like I did 20 or whatever it was 25 years ago, was, okay, this is a realm that's not here to, this is not a good place. This is not a good place. If there really was a loving creator God, they could make this completely different. Never mind how humans are, the natural, how nature is, we're as beautiful as things are, it's a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily as loving and beautiful as we like to perceive it. It has these elements to it, but so the thing for me then is, if once you have your intention, whatever that intention is, so my intention is to go, I'm ready to exit the cave. I'm ready to go beyond all this realm. I'm also going to do my best to be as prepared as possible, because I know now how many tricks and deceptions and layers of things we've been fooled with. Like, why are we here? I'm here because I got tricked. I'm 100% certain of that. I, as in my deepest part of my essence, got tricked into this realm. How it got tricked, I'm not sure. But I got tempted somehow, and I came in here, and it's like I kept sinking deeper and deeper into matter, and it's really tough, like quicksand. It's almost impossible to sneak yourself out. But now that I'm really wanting to get out, I know that just dying right now unprepared will not create the end result. It'll just recycle me right back in here again. And potentially, if we're going in linear time, it means I'm going to be recycled into the metaverse. Not interested. So therefore, how can I use the time I have, even if it's painful, even if I don't like it, even if it's harsh, I can use that as a driving force to say, then how can I learn to be as prepared as possible to reach a place that's not this realm, that I'll actually, like, this is for people out there who maybe don't believe my theory specifically, but at least if you believe there's some other place better to go, how can you be so prepared and ready that when the time does come, you're able to navigate to get to the place you want to go? So that would be my thing, is use the time you have effectively. Don't think just because you're dead, you're going to know more than you know when you're alive. Again, the indication also seems to be you don't. You tend to know about as much as you knew, even though some people try to say in the after death realm, all knowledge was available to me. Everything was available. I could know everything. What did you know? What did you learn? I don't remember. Well, what good was it, right? So use what you have now, recognize your own power. And even though the pain is deep and potentially, and the suffering is deep, use it to your advantage in preparation to just, that would, again, this would be, I think, to end it early, it ends the suffering here, but it might not end the cycle of suffering. And that's what you would really want, is to end all of it completely.
How do we define power in the context of what you just shared? When you say use all of your power, what does that mean?
I would say to it, by power, I'm kind of referring to an inner guidance, an inner strength, an inner intuitive knowing, an inner intention. Maybe that's a good word. And so it kind of links to will, what we were talking about before, but not to manifest anything externally. We're just using that intention of a roadway. That the intention says, this is the road I want to walk on, and nothing's going to take me off the road. What's that line from Moby Dick? Swerve me, ye cannot swerve me, else you will be, I can't remember exactly, but it was swerve me, ye cannot swerve me. Captain Ahab he was on his road and he was going to walk it, because the white whale is his mind, right? The white whale is the egoic mind.
Right.
So he's going to battle that whale, however long it takes, to overcome his egoic self. So whatever our pathway is, I think power is the intention that we're going to walk it. We might change it later on. We might realize I need to walk something else, but that intention is just, when I first started this after my near death, after my my almost wanting to commit suicide, and got out of it with the Egyptian TV show that we talked about before on other talks. My focus on studying ancient Egypt was so strong. There's nothing that could pull me away from that. It didn't matter how good something looked. If my question was, is this going to help me learn ancient Egypt? No, well, I'm not interested.
Right.
I'm just not interested. And that to me is power. The power comes from this strength of commitment, and the commitment of knowing where you want to go, what you want to do. And if you walk that commitment, you'll just, the power, what we're calling power, just starts to come to you. If you don't have a pathway that you're walking, everything already gets scattered. And so nothing tends to get built.
Right. This is a really interesting time to theoretically be alive, because these ideas are starting to show up in other areas, not just with your book, not just the show today, but other people. And some people follow Matt over at Quantum of Conscience. Mm-hmm. And he's been talking about similar ideas, although he may not have the same kinds of models that you have, but he's coming at it in his own way, right? We're looking at the big picture. We're looking at where we've been. We're looking at how this world gets influenced, who it gets influenced by. What do we do? Right. How do we nav through it? I was watching, I don't know if you know this guy. Some people do. His name is Joe Imbriano. Goes by the name of the Fullerton Informer. And he's been on the truth train for a while. He's an interesting character. He comes from a science background. He's an ex-Catholic. He's a born-again Christian. And he does all of his live streams from his car. Right? Yeah. He drives around Fullerton in his car, and he's got it. Like, he's on it. He knows what's happening. Right? He's doing the work to see the big picture. And he's talking about, and this is just a bit of a side story, but he's talking about the upcoming fake alien invasion. Right? He says, this is what's happening. This is where they're going to bring this thing. Be ready for it, right? And I've talked about it because that's every time they need a new distraction, trauma, and spectacle, it's got to get bigger, be bigger than the last one. Right? It's got to have more shock and awe than the previous one. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is his model of the world, and he's a Christian, and he's a flat earther, and that is. We've got the dome, we have the firmament, we have the luminaries beyond the firmament, and those luminaries, according to him, they're angelic beings in heaven waiting for us to come home, right? So he's in lockstep with everything that you're talking about, to some degree what Matt is talking about with other people, but his model is very different, right? He believes in a loving God. He believes in a loving Savior. He believes that unless you lock onto that, and by the way, he's not a dispensationalist, so he's not going to go into the rapture party, right? Unless you have that thing, you're not going to get through it. So these things they're popping up all over the place. The discussions are happening. The models may be different, but we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, it's like we say, all of us are just trying to figure out as best we can from what we see. And bringing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together on this, right? And every little piece will fit together. But we're in a zeitgeist with this. Like you could almost follow this over the last about 20 years, right? First was the flat earth. That kind of was an original zeitgeist for a while. And then it almost became religious and became very intense. And just when that happened, all of a sudden it broke out and became the Mandela effect. And that all of a sudden was the big thing for a few years. Then it became the Tartaria mud flood thing. And all of a sudden that was the new, almost like it just sprung up and everybody was interested in talking about it. And now I'm starting to notice, not that this material hasn't been around for a while, it's been around for 30, 40 years. People have been talking about this even longer, right? But all of a sudden in the last 2 or 3, like you say, all of a sudden, more and more is starting to rise up, more and more is coming. And even though I looked into this material 20 years ago, it's only been in the last couple that for some reason I got hit by the zeitgeist myself. Right. So yeah, something is happening in a lot of places where even people that you think, you're kind of surprised they're bringing up this area of discussion, but they're bringing it up. And I think it's because the ideas of the 1980s and the 90s where everything is wonderful, and if you just set your mind to it, you can create anything you want. Boy, everything is wonderful if you want it to be. The last 2 years to show people, that model doesn't work anymore. We're not living. If that world existed, it's gone. It's gone. Look, whatever thing we're in now is not that. And all of those old ideas of, you might say, how to navigate in this place spiritually have gone. It's something Bart Marshall and I talked about in one of our talks a long time ago, was that we're now literally building a brand new spiritual tradition for the next maybe 1,000 years in this place, because the world is changing. This realm is changing so greatly. All the old ways are not going to work. And we are at the cusp of actually starting to build a whole new way of doing things, which is also kind of exciting, but it's also kind of, scary, because you start to realize the old things don't really work anymore. And we don't really know what will work, because we're not really sure what this is going to become. But we're also in a sense of like, we're explorers, and those of us right now. And I think that's kind of the zeitgeist feeling. We're exploring a ways to interact with a completely new realm. And we have to be okay with that, to let the old stuff go and find what the new stuff is going to be.
Right. Yeah. You actually point that out pretty early on in your book, and clearly delineate these phases from flat Earth to up to Tartaria, and now having having the post life discussion. The other thing you bring up again in those first 3 chapters, which I totally commend you on, and it was something that I really opened my eyes back in 2010 and 2011, are the spiritual teachers that made their bank, during the 80s and the 90s, and even the early part of the 2000s. And they got on my radar really quickly right after 2009. And we had this just massive housing crash, and the debt and everything that went along with it. I'm like, okay, where are you? Where are you? You're nowhere to be found. You have no commentary on any of this. No Oprah, no Marianne Williamson, no Barbara Marx Hubbard, no Tony Robbins, no Deepak Chopra. Our so-called spiritual leaders were mute, absolutely mute. And so they were an object of my scorn and derision for a while. And moving forward, we go to 2020. Where are they?
Where are they?
AWOL, right? MIA.
The ones talking about, the ones who are saying, I'm going to lead you to ultimate freedom, but they're the ones who are fine getting rid of relative freedom. That's not someone I'm going to trust to take me to true. If you're going to deal with absolute freedom, then you better be able to deal with relative freedom too, and you better have the courage to be able to stand up and talk about when that's being lost. And so, as far as I'm concerned, 98% of them showed their true colors, and that means if you can't see through like the most obvious lie in recent human history, can we trust anything they've said up to this point? Absolutely. And I'm not sure.
And you even have somebody like Marianne Williamson running for president. She's running for president, right? That was her thing. She's running for president. She has a platform. She's on debates. Did she talk about any of these things? Maybe a little bit. but she certainly didn't use the opportunity to advance the discussion all that much. Yeah. So yeah, I think that that's a really important piece. Is these people have served their purpose, whatever their purpose is, and it's
And it's
incumbent
not that, again, all of that stuff is bad. I'm not like labeling certain spiritual
there's things
teachings
that
and
there are things
traditions
that
as
Tony
bad.
Robbins you can learn. You can learn some stuff from Tony
I'm
Robbins.
making sure that people know that there's value in it. The problem is when you start thinking that's all you need, that they have the whole package when they've maybe got this much of the package, yet people treat them like they've got this. And they wind up giving away their power, giving away their authority to someone outside themselves, rather than seeing, what does somebody know that's useful for me right now? Great, thank you, appreciate it. Move on to who knows more. Who knows more than them? Who knows more than them? Who knows more than them? And unfortunately, though, in this one here and what we've just gone through in the last 2 years, we're starting to see a lot of people that people put a lot of these teachers that people put a lot of trust in, that maybe gave them, oh, maybe they're level 4. We're starting to see, man, they're kindergarten. They're kindergarten level. There's still something you can learn, but it's pretty minor.
All right. So let's say these archons, the demi-urges, have their minions, their henchmen on Earth. Now, Matt from Quantum of Conscience, he believes that there's no people sitting around tables with cigars, smoking and making plans. Okay, that it all just kind of happens randomly due to chaos. I would disagree with him with that, but that's just my opinion. That said, let's talk about those people, because they're obviously carrying something out, right? Yeah. This goes back to an earlier part of our discussion where their possible agreement is to keep this thing going. But they are engaged in engineering the realm. Yeah. Now, what would happen, and this is not about making things better, by the way, but what would happen if we eliminated...
It's about understanding. Yeah.
But what would happen if we eliminated the engineers of the realm? Could the realm operate in the same way?
We have to remember we're on so many. This is a hierarchical system.
I understand.
It's a hierarchical construct. So what we think of are the ones who are sitting around making decisions really aren't. They're making decisions at the level that they're allowed to make decisions. The decisions come from above them and they get passed down. Then above them and above them. So even if you eliminate the ones that you see, you just eliminate the one layer, there'll just be a new layer that gets put in. It might take a few years. Short term for 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, things might be a little different, but it won't take long for it all to be restructured again, because it's not, you have to go right to the top of the whole thing. This is where that Newsbenders program that I
from 1966, I didn't watch that. I'd like to watch that. I read about it and I kept reading. You want to get into that a little bit?
Please do. It'll just blow your mind. And the end result of that entire 30-minute BBC program is that it looked like it was, you would think that the person who was there running the newspaper, who's saying, we create the news, we're the ones who decide what it's going to be in the future, but then he let it slip. Well, actually, it's not me, it's the computer upstairs. The computer upstairs makes the decisions and tells it to me. So already in 1968, in this explosive 30-minute program, they were saying that the decisions being made in our realm are not being made by humans. They're being made already by some form of AI. And now you move that 50 plus years in the future, how total must the AI system, what we think AI is from the world we think we know, the real AI is like 1,000 times beyond what we think. So for me, that's why I don't think the what Matt calls minions, they're making decisions at times on what they can make decisions on, but literally it's all coming top down, and it's coming directly from AI. AI has been in charge of this show for a long, long time. And that's another thing we have to understand, that we're not battling supposed people in positions of power. We're battling, in a sense, not battling a bad word, spiritual war. The spiritual war is the whole construct. And the best way, I'm just going to, I brought that up. I just want to get this, I wrote it down so I say it correctly. So, because people talk about, well, if we're in a spiritual war, well, what do we do? How do you handle a spiritual war, right? And it reminds, I think the best answer there is the movie from 1983. What was that called? The one that had the computer, the Whopper computer in it. That was the nuclear war games. Is that?
War
I think that
Games.
was the name of the movie.
Matthew
War Games.
Broderick. Yeah.
Right. Where the computer, the AI began to realize that its job was to win. And so it was started seeing the best way to win its nuclear war games that it was testing itself on was to actually launch, was to manifest it for real. So what Matthew Broderick did in the movie was teach the computer tic-tac-toe. So the computer, a game that, you can never, if you play it properly, you can't win, right? So the computer just attempted to learn tic-tac-toe, and it finally at the end of the movie just decided to shut itself down and said the only winning move in this game is not to play. Mm-hmm. And there's your answer of, I think, for dealing with the realm itself. We don't fix the realm, we realize what's going on, and we don't play it. Mm-hmm. We choose to unplug from the entire game completely. Would the game be able to continue? The game needs it. The game needs the pawns. The chess game needs the pawns working at the start of the game. If all the pawns are gone and everything on all the rooks and the knights and the bishops are all gone, and they're, do you have a game? Do you have a game anymore? So to me, that's a very telling piece of information to where we might be, which is this idea of the way we win where we are is not to play, to see through all of the systems that are going on, and to be able to just decide what we want to do in the moment, given what the external world is providing us at any one time. At least that's how I'm trying to live now. It's trying to just, I for a long time could easily focus. It's important to know what's going on. It's important to catch everything. It's important not to be fooled. But if you sink too deeply in it, then it's got you. Then it's got you.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. If you could become a blueberry and you could experience the bounty and the abundance of the blueberry spirit in your garden, mm-hmm. could you do the same thing with the AI? Could you become the AI?
I don't know. I would want to do that because that would put me directly into the entire system completely. Maybe that's a good idea. I would prefer to perhaps try to then be, again, because my focus isn't to be the AI. My focus is to be, you might say, the total good or the absolute, or, you might say reunited with the Father, however you want to say that. So then I would try to say, can I be that? Can I be that, and see what happens externally by being in that space.
Would there be some merit to learning and understanding the AI from the inside out?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in Wizard of Oz, all they needed to do was pull the curtain back and see who and what was running the reality. They didn't need to know everything that it did, right? So it could just, I could see it that on one level it could be useful, but then like anything else, it could become a trap, because then we want to understand it completely. We want to figure out how it all works. We want to write 10 books on it. We want to, I think that's one of these things of knowing when is it, what is right to research and dig into. What is it you're learning, and then when is it time to stop?
Right.
When is it time to, I don't need to know more than that. That's kind of why I stopped my historical research. Right? People have asked me so many times, why aren't you doing historical videos anymore? What, they were getting your highest numbers. You were getting 30, 40,000 people watching these videos. Why did you stop? Because, well, I learned what I needed to learn.
Sure.
I learned that history is a lie. And to just continue it, all I'm going to learn is I'm just going to see more lies. That's not going to help me personally. To others, that's still valuable who maybe don't know that. But once I got to that point, it's like, okay, it's time to put my energy somewhere else. And so I think we have to also always be cautious that there's always that road that can take our attention and distract us again and again and again and again. It's not just beautiful things, it's all sorts of things that can distract us for long periods of time. So we have to be really, like you say, aware and focused of what am I doing and why am I doing it.
So we're rounding things up here. We're coming to our second hour, and I'm very conscious and aware of your time, and I really appreciate your being here. But there's a couple more questions I'd like to ask you,
Sure.
and these come into the personal realm a little bit.
Okay.
Do you have a belief or faith or knowing in what we would call God? It's a two-part question. And the second part is, do you think that thing has an interest in us and wants us to break out of this thing that we're in?
Okay. Do I think there's a thing we call God? Yes. Is that thing interested in me? Yes. What is that thing interested in me? Using my energy and driving it back in the system and making me as deceptive and suffering and as difficult as possible.
So the God you're talking about is the demi-urge. You're
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So to me, everything that has to do with this realm, or even the spiritual realm now, even the astral realm, it's still linked in one way or another to the demiurge. Now, that doesn't mean the demiurge sometimes doesn't give good things and positive things and helpful things, but it's still doing it for its own purpose. There is, though, something, and I don't like to use the word God,
Right.
so I'll just call it absolute, so that it's something that's undescribable. And I would say, it's like, it would be like, of course, I had a psychopathic father, but let's pretend I had an actual caring father for the sake of this conversation. This would be like a caring father who, I'm out late at night and mom and dad I just want him to get home soon. He's out too late. That's all. That's what I feel the true absolute really is. It's just, it knows I got tricked. It knows I left home, and it's waiting patiently for me to come back, and is like it's just going to be welcoming. Good to have you back. And we'll go on with our day. So, but while I'm in here, I know that everything might not but might, even if it looks good for me, might be a deception. And now I'm tagging that in from my own personal life experience, when I realized how many times I've been manipulated by parasitic or other type of entities when I didn't think I was at the time.
So you've used the word good twice in the last minute. Use it earlier in our conversation, and there's a striking resemblance to the word good in God.
Yes.
Right. So can you make the leap to God? Again, it's semantics, right? But I'm trying to get to something here. I'm trying, because you've used the word and you placed kind of a moral and spiritual value on it, right? So if that exists, then something has to be connected to that thing. And maybe it's the demiurge, or maybe it's something beyond the demiurge, because something had to create the demiurge. Something had to create the demiurge, theoretically.
Well, no, the demiurge, according to Gnostics, right? The demiurge was Sophia attempting to create on her own without a male counterpart, that she wanted to create on her own, which couldn't happen. And this was more like an abortion, an aborted thing that took life, that didn't die, took life. That's the demiurge. Right. And then so the demiurge was never really a life form. So as you can see that right away, how it's like a computer AI right from the get-go. So it's like, it was a creation, but it was not a proper whole creation. It was incomplete. And so from that, and then from the incompleteness, this is the story. Again, I can't know for sure if it's true or not. It just sounds interesting. Is that this demiurge became very jealous of the true absolute God, and wanted to create its own realm, but couldn't actually create. This was interesting. Couldn't create, didn't know how to, so it copied. It took this other realm and started making copies of it. So that's very interesting, because it also means if that's true, let's pretend that it is for the sake of our conversation, then our realm as we know it is not just sort of thrown up by magic fairy dust. It's a copy of something else. So it's also interesting. Every time we are studying this realm, we're actually really learning something potentially about the mirror opposite of it, which is outside the cave. So it's very interesting that outside the cave might be copied and mirrored inside the cave. That's an
So,
interesting way of thinking of things.
so you're saying since the world is a copy, what you're really saying is that it's a Chinese production.
Mm, yeah.
I mean, I'm
Kind of.
being half joking around this, but I'm also kind of serious, right? Because the
Yeah.
Chinese are known for copying. That's what they do. They are not, outside of maybe spaghetti and gunpowder, the Tao Te Ching, and some form of tantric sex model, which are all very kind of interesting in their own way, right? As a culture, they're known for taking other things and copying them, right? And what is the dominant paradigm right now on the planet, or trying to emerge? It's the Chinese paradigm. It's the copy paradigm. We'll take this idea. We won't really do anything, interesting or new with it, but we'll copy it, right? So we're actually living in some ways with a version of what you're talking about.
Yeah, kind of like sort of like a layer within the layer of it. It's a good way of looking at it, because that seems to be what those who are running this reality want. They want the exact same system all over the world, run the exact same way, the exact same sets of controls, the exact same everything, right? As opposed to even 50 years ago, every place you went in the world was quite different. So
That's
there's a
right.
big difference. Now we're starting to see, and it already began with the influx of Western ideas and McDonald's and Starbucks all over the world. And slowly, 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 it started to get harder and harder to start noticing, where am I? What country am I even in?
Right.
And you're seeing that more and more and more and more, this idea of let's make it the same. And if you're a computer, that would make sense, right? The more things you have that are running on smaller possibilities, smaller pathways, smaller choices, that's easier for the system power wise. If you've got a million different things with 10 million different options, that's a lot of possible pathways that the computer has to keep accessing and running, and it needs a huge hard drive, you might say, to keep all that information. The more you tighten that in, this makes sense again, we're talking about reset.
Right.
When people realize this reset is about energy, that's what it's really about. I mean, energy, not from oil and gas. I mean, like energy of like the realm of the universe. That's what this is about. And it would make sense. The more you can compact the entire dream reality, well, the less hard drive space you need. So the less power you need to
Sure.
operate.
Sure.
It's also an interesting flip side. If you think about it as power with this reset, that's the Robert Monroe stuff. So for those of you who want to pick up my book and read through, it's in chapter 3, and I talk about loosh and resets. But if we're thinking about energy, it makes sense that if the theory is correct that we are the same as farm animals, we're here to be harvested for energy. That's our number one reason for being here. Then if the computer is here and we're here, there's a distance between us. So there's always going to be energy loss automatically between us and the system. Well, it would make sense if you need more power, hook the human directly into the computer itself. Then there's no energy loss when the energy is being drained out. There's no loss here. It's just once you're connected in the system, there's no loss. It's just direct. So it would almost make sense to explain what kind of is going on if we become linked to AI directly, linked to the system directly, less energy loss for the system.
Right. So if you use the human battery as the loosh model, with we'll just say, for the sake of argument, even though I don't believe in the number, 7 billion people. Let's say there's 7 billion people on the planet.
Yeah,
that's a lot of loosh, theoretically, right? And then the idea would be to, again, eliminate 80% of those people. I mean, that's kind of the stated goal. They've been really open about it. So you would think that by doing that, they would be eliminating 80% of their power supply, but the 20% that's left over, linked directly in to the new thing, becomes way more, so they don't need the 7 billion
Right.
people or whatever that number is.
Right. And they would get, because it seems like when a creature dies, that's the biggest loose harvest. So you have this giant die off in a very short period of time. So, and coming from catastrophic conditions. So you will have a massive loose harvest, sort of like a pre-power bonus for the system to get it all up and running to the next
Right.
level. And then, like you say, then you've put in place this newer system of less energy loss where, yeah, you don't need as much. It's easier to control. It's smaller amounts of AI computing power, you might say, for the system. And so when you start potentially looking at it that way, you can kind of start saying, wow, that would almost kind of explain what we're going through.
So just to play this out, to me, that system is a closed loop. Like, it is a closed loop system. Even if you get 20% of the population linked into the AI, and then you're just running this thing, at what point does that system become irrelevant? Like, it has to become irrelevant. I mean, that's what I think, because when you have 7 billion people, and theoretically, and you have all these different stories, the human drama, the this and the that, right? And you have this ability to tap into all these different energy nodes, that you have to continue the story in some way. You have to continue the story, whatever the story is. So when that goes and you have this harvest of 20% or 10% or 15, whatever that is, they're directly linked in, and they're getting that thing. There's nothing really new happening in there. There's really no new life, no new harvest, no new batteries, because population will be dealt with in a very different way. So my question is that, do they then take that energy and power up for another copy world, right? Is this how this world was created? Was this world created by another realm where people became batteries?
There you go. That's I think, when we talk about the metaverse, and this was linking into AI, and I think it's good to learn it from the standpoint of saying, hey, I don't want to be a part of that. So, okay, but yes, take a step back and say, well, wait a minute. How do I know I'm not in the metaverse now? And that I'm getting memories when the metaverse is being shown to me here of the last time we had this, and 80% got left, and I was part of the 20% there who was, plugged myself in and came into this metaverse. So it's not just I don't want to go into the one ahead of me. I want to backtrack as many metaverses as possible, as many AI systems as possible, to go back to as clear of an original space as I can. I'm not saying that, like you say, that is the way it is, but that's how I would want to think. It's not just I don't want to go forward. I want to go as far as possible. Or you would think Richard Rose used the concept of back when televisions used to actually have a cable plug in the back, right? When there's actually a wire. His point was, don't worry what's on the TV, go through the wire and go right back to the source. Remove yourself back to the source so that you'll know exactly what you need to do or don't do. As long as you're caught on the screen or focused on the screen, you're not getting to where you want to go. So same thing. It's not about going forward, actually. It's about going backward, as far back to the origin as possible. Right. Or even, no, it's possible. Just go back to the origin.
Right. Last question. You're married, right?
Yeah.
How does your wife deal with the interpersonal growth and reality that you're uncovering and exploring? Is she on the same page, or does she have to work to understand your evolving sort of cosmology and philosophy about who you are?
Oh, she's very knowledgeable on this subject. She has been dealing with it in her own way for 20 or 30 years. And well, you might say I'm moving at an incredibly fast speed sometimes, and she's kind of at times catching up, but it's in no way is it new. And in many cases, I would say she's probably 2 or 3 steps ahead in certain areas. And then I kind of catch up and get there. We sometimes have, of course, some very detailed discussions. And just because I feel or believe something. She doesn't believe the exact same thing. We're kind of in the same direction, but from different points. We just had a discussion today about a particular author and a little different ideas upon it. But that helps because I can share these ideas with the person I'm living with and spending my life with, and I'm not being thought of as, crazy, or actually that I'm being thought of as, you're uncovering something quite important here, not only valuable for us individually, but maybe for more than us. So yeah, she's quite knowledgeable in this stuff, and is as she puts it, it's much more interesting for her to listen to these interviews that I do now than when I was doing the exposition interviews.
Really?
This is more in her wheelhouse.
Interesting. That's interesting. Well, this has been great. And by the way, you're a pretty good fiction writer as well. I like your little fiction piece in there.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was good. The attention to detail, painting a picture of the surroundings, the dialogue was quite good. And I'm glad you kept that in the book.
Thanks.
And I know that you were trying to figure out where you were going with it, and you have a bit of a hybrid. I hope there's more of that in the book, because I only got the first 3 chapters.
Yeah, no, there's only one novel chapter in this particular book, because I was finding it was taking so much time to craft it, the novel chapters. So that's the only one like that. But there will be in the second book that I hopefully can write by next year. I will want to have like 2 or 3 of those, I think.
Got it. I'd love for you to do a whole novel.
I think that was my original idea, and it was just, it'd be different if I knew I had like 5 years or 3 years to write it. And but I felt, because I started really researching this hard in like March, early April.
Yeah.
And part of the reason was, I don't think we have a lot of time.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of time to play around with this. Like this reality is coming to a crunch point really, really quick.
Yeah.
And if I think I've got information to share, I've got to, as much as I thought I wanted to do it a particular way, I had to react to what I saw, the reality, the what's what I'm looking for, the flags that reality was putting up of where this is going and how fast it's going to go. And again, that's why I didn't even wait to just have the print book first. I wanted it out as a PDF book first, so that anybody who wanted to have it can start reading it like today. And yeah, the print book comes out soon, and so does the audiobook. Great. But I didn't feel like we're in a place where we can wait. And I thought this information would help some people. So that's why. But the next one, I'll try to have a few more novel chapters.
No, it was really good. And looking back on Castaneda's work, I mean, it's all a novel, right? Everything it's all a novel. Where do they find the PDF? Where are they going to find the book? Where are they going to find the recording of your audiobook?
Yeah, well, they can start my website, which has the still terrible name, Egyptian-wisdom-revealed.com. But I'm sure there'll be a link for you somewhere, and that you can go to Exit the Cave, and it's a minimum $5 donation. So it's actually by donation, and you can download the PDF right away. A couple of weeks it'll be out, so you can start looking. Obviously it goes to Amazon first, but that doesn't mean you'd have to buy it at Amazon, and it'll start moving to other bookstores slowly after that. On my YouTube channel, Howdie Mickoski Talks, I do read the first chapter of the book, so the whole first chapter is actually read, and then I will produce an audio book. A lot of people have asked, actually, would I not only create an audio book, but would I read it? So many people have told me they like the sound of my voice, that it's soothing to them somehow.
You have a very soothing voice.
Clear. Yeah. I have to be the one to read it. So I'm going to be doing that near the end of the month. So I'm hoping that's ready in November. And so you can go to those locations, my website and the YouTube channel, and you can track everything from there. And yeah, I'm hoping with 2 to 3 weeks that for those who want the print version will be ready for you then. But if you want it's $5, and it's one of those things. I hate to say that. I hate to keep saying this over and over again, but I really mean it. It's like, we don't really know how long we've got access to the things we have access to now. I'm not saying, hey, you're all going to be dead next week, but it just means you don't know how much power you've got, how much internet you've got, how much, things are changing on a day-to-day basis right now. So it's not just me. If there's something out there that you think is important from an information perspective, on a knowledge perspective, whether it's a book, whether it's a website, whether it's, they get that information, particularly print it if it's really important, or at least store it somewhere. Don't wait. Don't think it's still going to be there 30 days from now. It might not.
Yeah.
Decide on what's important to you and get access to it and have it available now.
Yeah. This is discussions that we've had on my other channel and this one. Yeah. Not only is there the potential for like a big event, a grand event, a CME, whatever, they're disappearing the internet while we're talking right now. Things are going away. They're wiping, they're scrubbing. When you go into Google, you do a Google search, it'll say, 3 million results, and you'll get maybe 25 pages of those 3 million results. And that's it. Right. So unless you know really what you're looking for specifically, even then it's getting harder and harder to find this stuff.
So that's why, if there's something that's important to you, if you think my book could be interesting to you, and again, it's a thesis, it's a presentation, it's how I'm seeing the world. Doesn't mean you should believe it too. It's just information to ponder on really deep questions that hopefully you'd want to start getting answers for yourself, and pick it up and have it available for yourself. But not just me. Who else? What else out there would you saying, hey, I really should have this. I've been doing it myself. Like a few books that have kind of been on my list for a while. Like, I should get to them. It's like, no, I got to get these. Like, I don't know I'm going to be able to. So get them now. So yeah.
Any examples of the books that you had to have?
Yeah. Well, what was one that was really on the top of my list that as an example? Okay. There was one called Can You Stand the Truth by a woman named Angelica Anagnostou. Not that I necessarily agree with everything she's putting out there, but what an interesting presentation. At times difficult to read, but wow, what an interesting presentation. That was on one of those ones that was up there. I really wanted to read that. I just got the transformation of society, the trans counter there. Could you read it to me? I just want to get the title right. It's the Belgian or Dutch philosopher who wrote about the totalitarian, the psychology. Maybe it's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, but he's talking more about mass formation. Maybe it's mass formation of totalitarianism. That was on my list. Really interesting book to read. Right. So those have been a couple of things on my list that have been important. Oh yeah, thanks. Here it is. It's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism by Matthias Desmet.
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting book. He had some really good interviews that I saw.
I've seen some of his interviews. Very good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, this is
so that was on my
too.
list, and
yeah,
and I just made sure that like little novels are back again. Night Train to Lisbon. I'm reading that again. That novel. The movie was good, but the novel is outstanding. As a real philosophic, almost like like a Jean-Paul Sartre or a Camus type of novel of really dealing with that philosophical existentialism within.
Right.
So there's lots of these things out there, and I'm really enjoying making sure I've got them and I'm reading them.
Right. Well, good. Thank you for sharing that and the ideas in your book, and we'll make sure that the PDF link is on the show notes here. And it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks. Always good to be here, Robert. And we'll hopefully be doing this again soon.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to follow up with you a few months down the line and see how not just the presentation of the material is doing, but how it's changed your life. Like, how you're living, how you're integrating these ideas. And if you have anything else to share with us in terms of the escape plan, the great escape, right?
Right.
All right. Yeah. That's Howdie Mickoski. Thanks for being here. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say it when it's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live, and we'll be talking about astrology and worldly stuff.